We're back! Welcome to the fourth video in the No EXP challenge on Disgaea 5. In this series, we turn off EXP and try to beat the game using other mechanics. If you're wondering how my characters are higher than level 1, be sure to check out the earlier videos, playlist linked on screen. Today, we're going to take on the next few chapters, starting with Chapter 8. Taking a look at Stage 1, there's no geosymbols, but there are these small choke points between each island which we can use to cut off the enemies. If you can limit the number of enemies that are able to hit your unit on a single turn, this is actually super helpful. Our fighter does have really good stats at this point, so we should be able to blitz through the next stage or two quite easily. Speaking of limiting the number of enemies that can attack us, I was super careless here, and I nearly died. I think in hindsight, it probably would have been better to bring our fighter back by at least one panel. We're going to have to do a quick heal just to be safe and pick up our fighter so he doesn't take damage for the turn. Thankfully, all of the enemies pushed up towards us, so we're able to repeat this strategy over and over. Stage 2. Blue panels recover HP and the green act as an attack boost. I realized on this stage that the enemy knights don't actually move at all, which means we can use triple strike and knock them off the blue panels. Another thing to mention is that when you attack a unit and there's a knight defending somewhere else on the map, anywhere on the map at all, they can take the place of the unit you were attacking for the one turn. So right here, I spent around 5 to 10 turns maybe just attacking over and over again without even moving, just wearing down all of the knights that we're defending. Stage 3. Because of the way I've chosen to play through the game, pouring all of my resources into and only strengthening a single unit, this was a little more challenging than it should have been. Because there's two geosymbols with the clone effect, we need to destroy both before we actually start killing off any enemies, or else they'll just multiply. What also makes this stage tricky is the fact that the geosymbols are on opposite ends of the stage, so we can't really just send in a single fighter and hope for the best. We're obviously going to have to throw some units in order to reach each symbol without taking too much damage. I did a really bad job at this on my first attempt. My fighter was almost dead before I even reached the first geosymbol. Second attempt was better, I was able to reach the first geosymbol, but still not quite good enough. Quick side note, it's really strange editing my footage sometimes days after I've recorded. I found this part of the recording where I didn't touch any buttons for at least a solid 30 seconds. I'm guessing either I was deep in thought or maybe I just had a stroke, who knows. After a few more attempts, I got really close to the last geosymbol, but as soon as I reached this cross section on the map here, my fighter was KO'd in a single turn. So you guys know the drill by now. I captured some pretties, interrogated, and then used the extract to strengthen our fighter. I bet you're wondering how I got here. Long story short, mistakes were made and I forgot to press the record button. To catch everyone up real quick, I used some amazing never seen before strategies to beat the boss, and now we're at stage 2 on chapter 9. The geo effects make this stage quite dangerous since everyone has raised attack and lowered defense, so it's super easy to get overwhelmed and lose on a single turn if I'm not careful. I think it would be best to keep our units close to the base panel, just so we can pick them up and heal them if we need to. The enemies don't seem to be pushing up on this map, so we do have to send the occasional weaker unit in, just to lure them towards us. Now, stage 3. No geosymbols, wide open map, we can really only do one thing. Use brute force. We did come very close to death on a few occasions, but that was due to poor planning on my part. Luckily, the enemies didn't rush us at all, so we had plenty of opportunities to heal. This was mostly the same as stage 4. Again, the enemies seemed to maintain their position until we got close, so we could just spend time to heal if we need to. Stage 5, and the final stage on the chapter. I was honestly really optimistic going into this, as we've been really successful against the previous bosses. After a few attempts, and I think another stroke maybe, this was the closest I could get with my current team. Now, I could capture some pretties and gather extract, but let's try some item world this time. We'll level up our attack and just leave the other stats as is. This time we're leveling up our Kung Fu Fist, which I just purchased from the store. Not a huge attack boost, but should just be enough so we can kill most of the weaker enemies in one hit. We'll have another go, and if I can't do it this time, I might just delete the channel, to be honest. Our attack isn't quite enough to one-hit kill the enemies, but it's pretty close, so I'm happy with that. I also gave our throwers some defensive items recently, so some of them can take 1 to 2 hits before they die now. But giving them some defensive items actually backfired here, because if they don't die in one hit after I pick up my fighter, I then have to spend another turn to throw, which is kind of a wasted turn. Okay, so we're finally making some good progress. I've got my buffs active, my health is high, and most of the enemies have been killed, we unfortunately don't have too many units left to pick up the boss between turns. Not sure why this AI was different to most others. Usually they go for the weakest unit, but for some reason they focused on our fighter, so we're able to heal pretty much most of the damage between attacks. So I think considering how anticlimactic that was, let's do one more chapter quickly. Not because I lost footage or anything like that. Let's just ignore that. Dude, look at Zerikan's biceps. I'm honestly really flattered that they decided to copy him from my likeness. From memory, the next chapter was mostly filled with tons of weaker enemies, I think zombies. So first stage, we need to be careful because there's so many enemies, we're bound to get poisoned at some point, despite the vaccine ability that we have. There is another ability that prevents poisoning altogether, but I didn't really think of that at the time. In hindsight, I think I probably would have won this right here if I did have the ability, but because of how close we were, I think I want to try again without changing anything. The main difference in this attempt is that I'm not going to pick up my fighter every turn. If I'm only in reach of 1 or 2 enemies, I'm just wasting units by sacrificing them every turn. Again, as long as we don't get poisoned, we should be able to take 1 or 2 hits each turn with no problem. And with 2 units left, that's the stage complete. Next stage was honestly a cakewalk. I was able to rush through it with minimal healing and buffs. Next stage, however, was a little different. I didn't play this very smart, and I let my fighter get surrounded really early, so I couldn't really do much and I had to retry. Next attempt, I held back a little and didn't really advance further into the map until all of the zombies behind had been dealt with. By then, the enemies had stopped spawning and there was only a few enemies left. Next stage. This might have been the easiest stage so far out of the entire challenge. I still had to heal and pick up our fighter, mainly because of the bonus attack from the geo panels, but because of that, we're able to one-shot every single enemy, even when we weren't on the geo panels. Final stage. My first thoughts are that we need to reserve as many units as possible for the boss, which is going to be an issue I think just because of how many enemies there are. Luckily, we did go into revenge mode just when the bulk of enemies started to reach us, so we were able to take out most of them pretty easily. By the time we had gotten through all of the enemies left and it was just the boss remaining, I still had a bunch of units left. We also recently started using the skill Rising Domination, which in this case was able to pretty much two-shot the boss. With that said, that's the chapter completed. We're getting kinda close to the end of the game at this point. If you guys have any suggestions for the next Disgaea game or challenges you'd like to see, let me know, as I do have a bunch of ideas I'd like to start working on, but I'm open to any suggestions you guys might have. See you in the next video.